Hello everyone, welcome to the third version of Paint Along with Rob. A bit different this time. This time we are painting a historical piece. The other two have been gaming figures of a fantasy variety, while always hanging around in the realms of the real world kind of thing. So yeah, it's lovely to see you all here and all the new faces, and hopefully you can learn a few things and be wildly entertained at the same time. So the plan is to paint this guy from 3D Gizmo. He's a 3D printed figure, and for me, so there's a new aspect to this. I've got some 3D printed figures, but I haven't gone through the preparation and painting stages. So in many ways, the preparation and painting is new to me as well, of this kind of thing. So there'll be bits where I'm kind of trying things I don't know. I'm used to resin figures, I'm used to metal figures and plastic figures, but the resin that's used to print is slightly different, and you've got different things to remove. But before I go into that, I'm just going to do a quick summary, kind of illustrate what I've done. Just some sample figures, just to illustrate some commonality. I do all sorts of figures, historical fantasy, and I do figures more than I get close to doing vehicles and aeroplanes, but I end up doing figures. So this is actually a figure that I did. In fact, the very first thing I did with Models for Heroes was paint this guy online as part of a step-by-step. So coincidentally, he's wearing the same stuff as this as our guy we're going to be doing this time. So this is a Tamiya plastic figure and a load of plastic jerry cans, and I like to display my pieces on simple wooden bases, like that kind of thing. So the idea is that we'll be painting this kind of thing, and I obviously have a bit of a thing for World War II tankers, because there's this guy as well, which is an Alpine resin figure that I painted as well. So same kind of jacket and whatnot, with some standing on an interesting base and that kind of thing. But these are smaller scale, and we're going to be dealing with something a bit bigger. So there's those two. So that's kind of the work that I do as an introduction to me, but I also do. This is a bit of a bigger figure. So this is a 75mm 1/24 scale, if you know your scales of an American Civil War chap. So this is the kind of thing we're trying to do, interesting faces, and help you learn how I might approach doing a face and all that kind of stuff. That's another one. And finally, just to illustrate, I painted a larger scale Apache woman, and this is actually pretty much the same scale as our dude. So she's 120mm scale, or in size approximating 1/16 scale. So we can kind of expect similar things and details and level of details that I'm likely to put into this, and what's achievable with something at this scale. So that's kind of an introduction of what I have done in the past. I've also been doing this for way too long, on and off for 40 years, so I've got a good bit of experience.
So this is the first 3D printed figure you've painted, is it?
It is, yeah, pretty much. Like I say, I've got some, but I've never really got as far as painting them. So there are issues or things that I will learn along the way. Now, our guy is a tanker, and he's been designed to go in the turret of some of the 1/16 scale plastic kits that are coming out this day and age. There's quite a few on the market from Andy's Hobbies headquarters. He does some Shermans, M4 Shermans and the like, and our guy is designed to go in the turret and populate those. We have an advantage in the fact that he's a one-piece model. We don't have to glue anything for our purposes, and although he's designed for the turret, he is effectively for our purposes, a bust. So it's not an uncommon modelling figure painting thing is to have a bust figure, so small to display, smaller than most busts on the market. They're often a bit bigger, but this is a nice scale for us. And he's wearing, just to go through some, there are, when I'm doing any figure, I do like to do my research. I find the historical aspects of things like that quite interesting and fascinating. And he's in one of the armoured divisions because he's got a triangular patch on his sleeve. He's sergeant, and he's wearing a jacket. Is called a jacket combat winter. Is its official designation, and it was a zipper jacket, and it's actually the same one worn by Brad Pitt in Fury. He's got his armoured crew helmet with no goggles on. You often see them with goggles. And he's got some leather gloves on, and he's got the headphone or the cabling going down from his armoured crew helmet, and he's got I think it's an M7 pistol holster. So the way I look at these things is, although when we get to painting it next time, there are official designations of how these things should be, but their uniforms fade, the colour production, depending on where they're made, might be slightly different. So we're going to be in the right ballpark for colours, but we're not necessarily going to be busting a gut to make them perfect or matching anything. But having said that about reference, I will be using along the way books like this that I refer to. This is an old book, but it's really good, and because it's colour photos and reproduction stuff, it has a good section, and I think they're using so they are using original stuff. So those are the kind of useful pictures that give you ideas about how our helmet's going to be edged with some leather, and colour, the cuff and collar details of the jacket, and things like that. So there's some useful little bits and bobs with these which will influence how I paint. You can see they've removed a armoured division patch from his jacket. There's a little bit of weathering going on there, some dirt, so we'll be trying to do those kind of details. Now, I don't necessarily want to create something photorealistic, because it is at the end of the day a little model, and as a result, I often kind of look at, this is a book on the GI. It's from Concord Publications, a company that produced dragon figures, and were illustrated by Ron Volstad. And there's a nice illustration in here which was actually released as a bunch of figures of US armoured crewmen. Again, you can see how he's got, if you think about the colours on what we were looking at before, he's done a pretty good representation. I kind of look at, I like to try and replicate these illustrations more than I do want to replicate a photograph. So these are useful pictures as well for me, to get a feel and all that kind of stuff.
Would you put those links to the books online for us?
Yeah, I can do. This one might, if you were hunting, it's a great book, but it's a bit, I don't know if Concord haven't been produced in years. But
okay. Well, maybe some more ones. Maybe
you might find. Yeah, I've got some other links as well, and Ron Volstad, the illustrator, does all sorts of books. Okay, so that's and you will find all those things online as well. I mean, those kind of uniform details. I've got another book on all the official designations. It's a bit of an interest of mine, so my reference library does contain those things. So, onto the figure himself. Right, let me see. So like I say, he's a one-piece model. Because he is 3D printed, he doesn't have the usual kind of things that you'd expect from either a resin or a plastic figure. So he hasn't got kind of the mold lines from a two-part cast, but he does have things that we don't see in a regular resin or plastic thing. So I'm just going to zoom in, and you can see mine. Yours all might be slightly different, but mine's got these little dots which I will want to cut off. These are kind of like, I guess, the sprue gates. If you have done any 3D printing or got close to any 3D printing, these will be the supports that come off. And I assume that you will all have similar but not necessarily exactly the same things. We're going to want to remove those. And I've got a couple of bits where they're pitted, little pits, that I'm going to want to fill in. They are mostly on the back, so I assume when he was printed like that, and with the slices going in that way. And there's more evidence of that because we do actually get, you can see there on the forehead of mine, the little print lines. So I assume that was the last bit that came out when it was printing. You can see a few on his cheek as well at that angle. Now for me, all these things you do not have to do these things, but equally I like to have a nice clean surface in which to print. So this is the often mildly boring, tedious part of model making, which is preparation. And it's can be quite relaxing to do. It can also be quite frustrating to do. And there's different things I would use initially to do this. A modelling knife, a sharp modelling knife is the obvious thing to just take off these little pegs. You can see loads of little printing marks there. That's not an area we're going to be interested in. We're going to worry about, because that'll be on the base, on the underside when this is finished. So this is where I don't know how this will go, because I've never done anything like this before with these, so I don't know how well this resin takes. I'm just using a scalpel blade and just going to do very simple slicing to remove some of those bits.
And it being resin, I guess you have to be really careful with the bits that come off. Just make sure you don't breathe them in.
Yes.
Or eat them.
Yeah, I would assume that good classic resin models, if you sand them, you have to be careful. And so I can cut those little nodules, stubs. I don't know what the official term would be called. I can cut those off with a technique which is useful for plastic figures and removing mold lines. Some of you will know this, some of you will be brand new to it, is the scraping of a blade at almost right angles to a surface will just remove thin slivers. So it's a way of removing a mold line, but equally, if you're left with any of these marks, you might be able to smooth them slightly with that very simple motion of removing scraping them and removing those marks.
One of the things that people always point out is once they've been painting, the paint will highlight every single little hole and divot and bit that you've missed. So it's always really, really important to make sure that your model is as perfect as you can get it.
Yeah.
Or you have the patience to get it too before you start, because it's unforgiving, isn't it, the paint?
Yes, very much so. And we're going to find this. So we've got essentially two problems to resolve. We've got these little stubs, which are relatively easy, and then there's going to be the 3D lines there, which actually disappear into that hole. You can see now with the way that we paint, or the way we're planning to paint, which is often very thin layers, the thin layers will very much draw attention to those print lines. So one thing we're going to want to try and do is very carefully remove those, but I've been trying to work out the best way to do them, and we'll come to that in a minute. So first of all, I'm just going to carry on removing some of these worst ones. We're not going to do the whole thing. I'll probably do the demonstration aspect of it and do some more of it off camera later on, because if there's a lot of it, a whole evening of watching somebody scrape away a figure is not necessarily what you signed up for. But I'll also try and show some ways to fill in these, because I've got quite a few of these little divots which I'm going to have to fill, but I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do the filling of those first, because if I'm using any form of putty, it's going to be soft, and I'm going to be handling it for other things first of all. So I'm going to avoid trying to. You can see that. Yeah, it disappears. I'm going to want to sort that out. If that makes sense. But there's going to be some which are very obvious. That one's got to go. I think it's also, you've got one like that, which is obviously in the wrong, or a stub. But if you look here, that one is part of his belt. So it's that kind of slightly odd thing, knowing what to remove and what not to remove. So whenever I'm doing anything like this, I have to ask myself, is that going to annoy me when I'm painting it? Is when I'm running a brush, say on the underside of his jacket here, because this is going to be painted dark because it's going to be in shade. We'll come to that next week. I'm not going to want to encounter these two bumps here, so I am going to try and remove those and make them as smooth as I can underneath, like the bits where they don't actually exist. So a little slice with a scalpel, and then I'm just going to drag my blade. Now, yeah, I'll just say as well, I'm using, this is a number 15 blade, and I could equally, other ones I use regularly is a number 11, and I think it's a 10A. Yeah, 10A. And I can do, those are my three go-to blades. And sometimes, obviously, caveats involved. It can be, when you're doing some of them, it's even easier to hold the blade on its own sometimes and have the rest of the handle, as long as you're careful, obviously. But you can sometimes have more finesse. If I'm sculpting, I will often use the blade on its own like this.
So is that working for you, using the blade rather than a sanding stick? Is that? doing what
For
you
me
need
at this
to do?
point, yeah, I would say, from what I can see so far, because of the shapes, these are very small. Here's another one. Sometimes you have to turn them around, and then you'll see them catch under the light. So
There's lots of filings and stuff that are coming off, but I guess that can be removed afterwards, huh?
yeah, because these are just small lumps. I mean, just to demonstrate that there's no one single right way to do these kind of things. You can use. There are needle files, and you can find the right. If you can find the right shape one to do it, but because these are curved surfaces, these are probably a bit trickier to use. Because they are curved, because these are concave and convex surfaces with creases in the uniform. So to get the right kind of file to be able to file that down can be tricky. So I often start off with a blade, and I might end up with. I also have these Infini model stuff. These are probably more used on aeroplane kind of things, but I use them on all sorts. But again, these are big flat things which might work on the bottom there, but wouldn't work very well in some of these other areas. But then you can buy those same kind of Infini sponge backed sanding things, which can be good to get in more awkward shapes, which I might have to do at the end if there's some bits to do. I would probably use at the end once I've filled in some of those little holes there. And of course, there are final polishing things like these abrasive materials, pad things. So, yeah, there's a number of ways of doing it. Personally, I will, because I've got lumpy things sticking up, it's easier to cut them flush with a blade than it is to sand them down, because you might sand bits around it as well when I think about it. There are things I do that I don't even know why I do them.
Yeah, we want to know the Rob way of doing things. That's what we want to know.
So yeah, I'm gonna. I guess the key thing is that you've got to keep looking around. A mildly annoying bit here is, I don't know if you guys have got whether these are the same. So you've got this lovely texture on his collar, and you've got a stub right in the middle of it. So we're obviously going to want to remove that.
On the left side of his collar.
Yeah. I assume it's the same for everyone because it's a digital print and those aren't random locators. So I'm going to, with a blade, just remove a raised element of that.
Oh, I see. It's a raised bit. Yeah, gotcha.
So yeah, so I don't want to dig too deep into that. Now, this is where you get an extra bonus bit of paint along with Rob. We're going to do some sculpt along with Rob. So I do sculpting, and there are ways of sculpting which are you can do additive and removing aspects. So you can add putty to sculpt something, and you can remove the putty, and you can also remove the resin in this case. So if you're brave enough, and I'm going to try and do this, is I'm going to scrape upwards like you're scribing a plastic kit. If we're going to try and scribe a panel line, we are effectively scribing that collar texture back in. Now, it would work on a regular poured resin. I'm finding this a bit tricky, but that's because this is a kind of resin I'm not particularly, it's a printed resin. So effectively though, this is a form of sculpting. So I'm putting that texture back in, which
I see. Would it be easier to like cut it out and then add putty and then resculpt it if that doesn't work?
it is an option. It's a very good call. It would take more time, but
that would annoy you, wouldn't it, if you're painting that and trying to get all the little creases and then you've got this great big.
Yeah, because when you're doing something like that collar, and the model has given you the sculptor has given you the there's another one on the other side now. Look.
You sure they're not supposed to be there?
Little bits and pieces. Pardon me. Yeah, you want to kind of take advantage of that texture when we're painting it. You know, we can use a wash on it and bring out some of this lovely cuff detail. There's one under. You can, as you look at it, you see more and more little bits that require a little bit of cleanup. Now on this side, this one is already quite flush. It doesn't look like it needs trimming off. So I'm going to try and scribe straight in. Now you see one of the things as well, I'd say as well, and part of this we don't know. Is, as I say, it's new to me. The dealing with 3D printing and how these lines will deal with paint, and so some of that might not be known until I get primer on it. But if I can remove stuff first, because I can see that on the top quite clearly on this head, but the more I dip this round angles, the more you can see. That might, for all I know, that might all disappear with primer on it, but at the moment it's all I can see, and I know there's a chance it might be a bit of a pain.
I wonder if everybody's is the same, to be honest with you.
But what I'm doing here is, as you might do, this is purely experimental. So this is using the blade like you're removing a seam line, a mold line, and I'm just doing across the surface. I can almost hear it going across that surface, but it is.
And these are all lines that are created on the process of building up the layers, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think whenever I don't have a 3D printer, and most of the discussion I read about online is how to minimize this kind of thing. It's almost like, what are the printing parameters that will reduce this? And I think there's an element of printing an angular mechanical thing, as it were, has different implications than printing a rounded surface thing like we've got here. Now you can see that I have begun the process of removing that, but there's also, I kind of think a bit of filing is probably going to be better, but I don't know yet. But you can see that it's not a straightforward Now, as I say, I am going to just checking my notes. Yeah. I'm just going to carry on taking a few more of these out before I have another proper stab at doing some of those lines. I want to try that one more than anything, and I think that is a job for a while, but I haven't got the right one out at the moment. But yeah, you sometimes have to be methodical and just go through this. It's a very whereas with a resin figure or a plastic figure, you can follow the seam line round, and you know when you've done the seam line, you've done your cleanup. This is a very different beast. It's a different. You can't always predict where these stubs are going to be, so it's a case of going round and searching for them. And some will be less critical to get perfectly.
You'll probably find them half of them again once you've primed, no doubt.
Yeah, well, the priming will be a thing that we'll use to identify more of this kind of thing, and I will point you. I'll talk about priming after the break, but it's worth while I remember now. Although our previous paint-alongs haven't included videos of me priming, there is a video of me priming in my garden on my own YouTube channel, which has only got 3 videos. There's nothing exciting. It's called Orbs Miniature World, and yeah, and it was actually a Models for Heroes figure, which was done. So if you find it and you're wondering which one it is, it's this figure is being painted and it starts off being primed. So another Tamiya plastic figure, and I still haven't finished him. But he's probably 2 years old now.
We'll finish him one day.
Yeah, so there's about 3 videos about painting his face and whatnot. So, but yeah, it also, I think the first one includes priming and hosing him in Mr. Surfacer or something like, or Chaos Black or something like that. Anyway.
So I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
What are you going to use as primer? What are you going to use as filler?
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. Because often filler, I will use more than one type of filler depending on what I am filling and the nature of what I am filling. Now, because these are little subtle holes, I think you could probably use something like what do you call it, Mr. Surfacer from a bottle. Mr. Surfacer 500, I think, is one, and just dab it in. Milliput is another one, or you could use some of the little tube. I'll get them out in a minute, but yeah. If you've got some, yeah, I think something you can stick in and then almost run your finger over top to make it flush and rub away the rest would be good. But at this point, I'm still in 2 or 3 different minds. I think there are a lot of options we can use. And I might try the little plastic putty kind of stuff, because these are so small and they just need to be leveled off effectively. It's not like we're filling in a gap under an arm from when you're joining 2 surfaces together and you've got a big gap.
They're all the same sort of size holes, are they?
Yeah, I've got personally, I'm not seeing anything other than that's probably the biggest one I've got, and you can see there's one there which is a bit smaller. There's quite a few of them, little pock marks, which just got, I'm sure, must be related to the stubs.
Yeah, it's the There's a word for it, isn't there? Little struts things.
the supports.
Yeah, any putty, I guess, would work.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to use a 2-part epoxy putty for most things I do, but that's because of my sculpting background, and I tend not to get to the point where I want to use a filler. But yeah, I think I've got some MIG. It might be MIG ammo filler, which I might try, which will dry quicker than using milliput. I don't have to mix it, but I'll do that in a little bit. So,
well, you've got so many holes. You could try a different filler for each one, and then do a proper test, like a Pepsi challenge or something.
yeah, right. So,
give you 5 minutes for a break, mate. Okay.
Yeah. So, gonna go around. What I mean, I would, like I say, there's little bits to try and resolve elsewhere. I've got you can see here actually, it's also knowing what's real and what's not. So we've got here, that is a support going from his lower ear cover to the neck. You can see it's got I'm going to slice that off.
Well, is it going between the two parts of the model, is it?
Yeah, so it's from his head.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
You can see actually, if you look on the other side, you can see the remnants. I've actually got a bit of a gap in mine there. That might be nice to try and fill, or I could paint it as a damaged bit. But to remove something like this, I do need the bigger handle on it, because I haven't got the ability to press quite so aggressively with a blade on its own.
So I guess if you don't know these uniforms, then I guess a quick look on one of the little reference books or internet to have a look, to see if that's not a strap or a button or something.
Yes, it is. I mean, this is why it's handy to, because you don't always know what's what. I'll just say here again, I can see on his shoulder there. You can't quite see it, but my suggestion and instinct is whenever you see these print lines, you want to smooth them down. I'm scraping at approximately 90 degrees to them. So if the print lines are going in this way, I'm scraping that way across them to try and smooth them out. And I'll also say that my instinct is, because this is a convex and concave surface, this blade with a rounded surface is probably going to be more forgiving than trying to use a flat blade, because it will just pick up on the bit that
that one you just chopped off, it might have been a radio cable, Clive says. And I'm looking
here at, going into his neck.
Yeah, and I'm looking at pictures, and there's like a little tab on the bottom front of the ear cover.
Well, there's a tab. There is a tab.
Yes.
There.
Right. Yeah, there's a little tab. Yeah.
But if I look at this cable here, I can see that goes up behind into the back of the thing. So I take the point, but I'm not sure it is. I think it's a...
Oh, yeah, it goes around the back. Yeah, I'm just looking at another picture with the wires, and they split on the other side. Will be under the neck, I suppose.
But it's an interpretation that you can make, and you're all perfectly at liberty to make your own interpretation of it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, build it back in again. Hope you still got it.
Yeah, it's there somewhere, down on the desk somewhere.
Might be a throat mic, Paul says.
Yeah. So you can do. I can see some success in scraping away these mold lines. As I say, though, we won't really know how severe they are until get primer on, and it could be that with a bit of primer sloshed on it, they might get filled in by the natural nature of the primer and paint and stuff.
Yeah.
So there might be a bit of prime it, have a look, can you still see it, remove it. That's often the purpose of the primer. But what is, I guess for me, there must be reasons to do it, because the figure was printed like that, with the lines going this way. Given that that's the bit we're all going to look at, it might be nicer to have those lines on the back, and have them up here, rather than when we look at this model, we're going to be looking at them like this. We're not going to be looking at the back. So those lines, they must. I don't know anything about 3D printing, so I guess could be talking out to my backside.
We could find out.
It's an interesting one. But now I'm just going to give this, before the break, I've got this is the Infinity sanding thing. It's 400 grit. So it's the coarsest one they do. Because I don't want to go in too coarse to start off with. And just going to see how that responds to. Oh, sorry. It's one of those things that we don't need to turn. It's not like the surface of an aeroplane or whatever, where you might want it to be perfectly shiny and smooth. This is going to be a leather surface that can have texture on it when we paint it effectively, so it doesn't have to be perfect. But that's that's.
I have to see it once it's been primed as well, to see what needs to be done.
Yeah, because the thing is with this is that you can see. Ooh, let's go right in. That's definitely taken it down, but you can see where the dust from the sanding has accentuated it closer to that strap going over the top or reinforcing bar. So
we filled it now. We filled them.
Yeah. Job done.
Easy. Right, let's take a break, mate.
So there you go. So
we'll be back in a bit, yeah?
Yep. Bye-bye. Welcome back. Right. Going on briefly with the filling of let's move that there. Filling of gaps and cleaning up. I was having some good success with using a file or form a file to get some of the lines off the front of a helmet. I do feel that I will concentrate on getting these lines off areas which will be most noticeable for us when we're painting on, because it's a face. The face is going to be the key part of this figure. This is going to be the bit that when you look at it, when you show it to people, they are going to look at the face. So we want to make that as nice as we can, and areas around the face. So obviously the front of this is a good place to do it. So as I was doing before, we can get so far close to the that kind of strap over the top but the rest of going tight into the to that strap just to finish off with the blade is quite a nice way, quite a straightforward way of tidying that up. So it's a combination of tools.
Steve asked before the break, is it worth priming it first to highlight the defects before filling and priming?
You could do. There's nothing wrong with doing that. I would rather prime once for me, or if I can get away with priming once, it would be once only. Because if you prime it and you see where the problems are, you're going to be scraping away resin and paint. So if I can deal with what I can visually now and then let primer do it, the bits I miss, or help with the bits I miss, that would be my way of doing it, which is what I'm doing now, funnily enough. But I don't see that what you're thinking there is an issue. That seems perfectly valid. So yeah, I'm not going to dwell too long on trying to remove all of this. I will do more cleanup off camera later to the point at which I feel I'm happy with. But this is more demonstrating ways of doing it. So I've used you can needle files, filing sticks or sanding sticks. Again, it suddenly dawned on me that I did mention the door here. So these Infini guys produce these sponges, sanding sponges, and I've got in the habit lately of cutting them into little bits like that, and then you can stick them in one of these grippy. I'm sure these tweezers have got a name, but it's a good way of holding them when sanding things. So that's another. And this is good for a surface like this because of the convex and concave surfaces, because this has got a bit of give in it because it's a sponge. So you're not using a degree of rigidity of a stick that isn't forgiving. The needle files are even less forgiving, and this is a little bit more forgiving. And I think something like the scraping with this has got a bit more nuance in it because you've got a very small area and how hard you scrape is up to you. Right. So as I say, I've still got some bits and pieces to remove. There are still bits I need to double confirm whether those bits would need to come off. But there's some bits on the underside there I'll still need to remove. But a lot of it has been done, I think. So yeah, now I'm going to try and just go through the motions of trying to fill some bits. So I've got this Mr. White putty. I think there are similar products from Ammo, AK, Tamiya all have a similar product. This stinky stuff. It will dry relatively quickly. I'm going to use an old business card. This is the way I tend to do these things. Get some out. I tend not to use this all that much, so a lot of this, there's probably smarter ways of using this. And if there is, shout at me, because I need to learn as well.
Nick was just saying that he would use a thin black wash to show any imperfections, and I guess you do that, and then then go back and have a look at all the bits that you've missed, maybe, because that would certainly highlight them, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
If you wanted to.
think it was stuff like this.
You know, you could say that it was somebody else's jacket and there was bullet holes, maybe.
Yeah, could do him as a zombie man.
Yeah.
Mm.
Or you could have got some milliput, very flat piece of milliput, and put a little stitching around it, like it had been patched up.
Yeah, you could. There's all different ways you could do this. It actually. Ooh. What's that?
Can't see what you're doing there, Rob.
No, sorry, I was just looking at this strap that went round here, which is attached to his microphone or his speaker. I think it's the microphone. It goes up here and then it stops. I was kind of going, where's that gone then? So I have to work that out.
Who knows?
Who knows? Yeah, so I've just whacked this stuff in a couple of holes to see how that looks. But that would be the method. It's not easy to do and a bit boring to see because this has got to dry and I'll sand it down and whatever. But yeah, filling in those with, like I say, I'm using this. I could use milliput, but that involves mixing it and then applying it and leaving it for hours on end. So yeah, there's very little more can do about the actual preparation in that respect. So what I'm going to move on to now, because that will be like watching even worse than when we're painting, as we've done before. You can, with acrylics, you can do stuff pretty quickly, and watching paint dry is actually quite interesting, whereas watching this dry isn't. So I'm going to move on and go on to before we even get round to priming this, when we're making models or when we're painting figures, what we don't want to be doing is painting something and holding him. What we want to do is hold the figure so we don't have to hold it. There are various ways of doing this. There are various tools on the market and things that aren't designed for it. I'm just going to cover a few now. So I paint figures, and we briefly saw one earlier. So this is a fancy thing which you can buy, and it's a way of mounting a figure to paint it, just to illustrate, and it will kind of segue into what we will be doing in a minute, and that is a figure has got a bit of wire in them because I tend to mount them on display bases. There's a bit of cork inside a lovely turned wooden handle, and it's got a little split in it where you put the wire in, like that. And when you press the cork in, it presses the two halves of that split together, and the figure is holding it. So this is a company called, I think it's Artis Opus, who make these. This is a nice one, quite fancy, not cheap. I bought 3 during their original quick Kickstarter launch. But they go, when you're not painting something, you want to be able to put it down and it not falling over as well. So these come with a little stand. They also do same company, slightly different versions of them. So this is a smaller version, which is good for a mini. Same principle, but this is just a smaller bit of wood. Again, you can hold the figure in there and not touch the figure. Your fingers will potentially be a bit oily, greasy, and you don't want to be getting that on your figure while you're painting it. Again, this is another slightly different version. This has got a kind of ceramic bottom, and again, it's a bit of cork split in two. This is a weird one because, or not a weird one, I've got another one here, a slightly bigger one. I figure I'm sculpting, but the idea is that you hold it like that, and your fingers, when you're holding it, your fingers aren't gripping it. It's quite comfy to hold. You see, so that's just another design that is out there on the market. However, you can have those fancy ones, but you can't beat a good old bit of a pin vise. I've got a few of these acquired over the years. Pin vices with a flat base on one side, because again, I want to put something down when I'm not painting it. I don't want to lie it down, and that's again a bit of wire. This is a figure I have sculpted myself, but principle is a bit of wire in there, and you can actually see what I'm doing. And I probably use these more than anything, and they're quite, if you have got a model that's in multiple parts, you've got a head separate or whatever, these are really, really handy to stick separate parts in separately if you've got more than one of these.
And devices are all over the place. You can buy them everywhere, can't you?
Yeah, these ones actually were old. Games Workshop don't do this style anymore, but I think I got these from Games Workshop originally. It was an old form of Games Workshop pin vise, and that I have a pin vise. I might sound a bit Keir Starmery, but my dad was a tool maker, and I've inherited a few of the tools that he had. Now he's long retired, and the best pin vise I've got is the one he used as a tradesman kind of thing. It's better than these, and these, it's just one of those things. So I don't need to. It doesn't got a flat base, so it hasn't been turned into a painting holder. And then finally, corks. Just some people have used wine bottle corks. Here's a wine bottle cork. I don't use wine bottle cork because they're a bit too narrow, and as I was saying, I don't want something to fall over. These are demi-john corks. This is a bigger demi-john cork, and they are quite stable because they're often wider than a wine bottle cork, and because the tapered nature of them, wider at the base, means they're more stable. I also have got recently into the habit of putting some milliput flat on top so that I can drill a hole to put wire in. In fact, this guy is on a bit of wire going into the base there, and because of the milliput, that's you're not just relying on it being forced into the being forced into the cork itself. It's a bit more stable, and that basically what I'm going to use to hold my figure. So I think this one I did toy with using that one, so a biggish one, but I think this will be stable enough with its size.
Have you used museum putty before? Mike asks.
Museum putty? I've never heard of it.
It's like super blue tack.
Oh right, no, but I do use blue tack. I try to avoid blue tack, but something like this, I will drill a hole in him and drill a hole in there, and because I'm not mounting it for display purposes on here, I'll also stabilise it with some blue tack. But the museum putty sounds interesting because sometimes blue tack can kind of give way eventually. I have used it to hold things while I'm painting, but so this is basically the older drilling a hole part of the video. So I'm not I could do it with that tool, it might end up doing it. So I don't know. I did actually I say I haven't done 3D printing before, or painted 3D printing. I was given a plinth base to mount regular resin head I painted for Mr. Skiffins, actually, and I drilled a hole into it to put the head on, and it turned out the printed resin inside hadn't set. So suddenly my drill bit disappeared into the plinth, and then some resin poured out of it, which was a bit weird. I couldn't quite get it to stop, and I think you need some kind of UV light to stop it. And it was one thing I don't have in this house, it's UV light. So I will, this is just for demonstration purposes. It's gone in that far so far, and it's relatively boring, so hence my ad lib. I could do this. I do have a motor tool, but it would take just as long to set up as it would just to do this element of the demonstration. So
while you're doing that, the model, if anyone's listening who wants to get involved and get the same one, is available from 3D Gizmo. If you head onto their website, 3dgizmo.com, the Tank Commander is available. It's one of the cheapest models they do. That of course has nothing to do with why we've chosen it. But it's available on there. And then also Artis Opus donated paintbrushes for this project as well, which is very kind of them. So everybody should have had an Artis Opus #1, I think, Series 1. Yeah, that's the one. Series S, isn't it? Size 1. In the back as well, which I'm sure you will be using and testing out later on.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I will move on to brushes in just a little bit, as I do more about it. But yes, it's I haven't used it yet, but it does look very nice, I have to admit.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna, what I would recommend is using the thickest wire you can, or I would drill quite a bit further up into there, but for the purposes of this, so I've already drilled through the putty and forcing it into the base, but that will be, and I will end up putting a bit of blue tack in there, and that will have him ready to be painted. So I put him down. When we're painting, I can hold him without holding him, and that will be how I'm going to utilize him. So demijohn stopper, like I said, you couldn't get away with that. That would be too narrow, and he would be top heavy and topple over, which will annoy you. But yeah, if you can, it could be, if you do have if you do have museum putty, it sounds very good. And anything you can hold comfortably in your hand would also do. I'm not going to use it, but even an empty jar like that, or a jar like that, even you could probably get away with blue tack, museum putty and blue tacking to the top of something like that would work as well. As long as you can keep your hands away from touching him, you will probably knock him with, I just did, and with your thumb or whatever when you're painting. But you want to hold him as little as possible, because it will just mean that our greasy fingers won't damage him. But you can see at the moment he twists around quite easy, which is why I will end up blue tacking him. And you can see also when we get to priming, which will be in a minute, you can see these are being used to prime things quite regularly. Even that one, obviously I tend to use black. So yes,
the wire that you've used, could you use a paperclip?
You could use a paperclip. It needs to be not bendy, basically. Paper clips are a bit more bendy. A good bit of brass wire is handy to get if you are going to do figures, because you can bend it obviously, but it is quite a stiff wire. You can buy brass wire for pinning purposes from various manufacturers out there, and you can buy structural brass wire for or different hardnesses of brass, different alloys, I guess, for various purposes. This is 1mm diameter, which is what I've used for this. I have various thicknesses of it for various purposes, because that's a brass wire armature. But yeah, you could use, or just say something like this. When I started converting figures and repositioning arms, I use paperclip wire. So any wire you can, which has got a bit of rigidity, would be fine. But if you were to decide that you wanted to do figures a bit more, this plastic figure here is a good example of not having any wire in him. He's got a hole in his foot ready to take some wire, basically, because I pin as much things as I can. Oh, look, there is the wire, which I hadn't glued him to. But so yeah, there is a lot of wire knocking around on this desk for various purposes. Even look at this. Some of you may have seen this. A little fantasy diorama, and there is some wire. So pinning things to bases and things is what I do quite a bit of. And so if you are going to find yourself doing more and more of that, it's well worth investing in some. It's not, £5 will get you several lengths. But paperclip wire will do. Right. So assuming that all these holes are filled and cleaned and sanded smooth, and all those stubbins and gubbins have been removed and cleaned, and the print lines have been reduced as much as you can, and he's attached to his base, the next thing we will do is prime him. You can give the figure, because we've been handing him to clean him, you could give him a little wash in some washing up liquid and all that kind of stuff. With all the figures I've done, I tend not to do that, even if I've been cleaning it and handing it. Why? Because for the most part, once I've got them attached to here, I hardly ever touch them again. So it's highly unlikely you're going to remove things from the painted surface, because that would only happen if you touched it effectively. And the idea is I'm going to reduce it. I'm not going to be touching him once I've got him ready to paint. There's a multitude of different primers you can use. You can use primers that go through airbrushes, and I think a lot of people use them if you're doing tanks and aircraft and things like that. I don't. I have an airbrush, but I will still prime using a rattle can. There are, at the one end of the scale, Halford's primers and things that you can buy. Perfectly good. Nothing wrong with using those. I've used them. You can tell that because I've got one. And then if you've got a Warhammer, they're called now, of course, Games Workshop, I use this one quite a bit. Probably one of my favourite primers, partly because it's got a nice finish when it dries. It's not with acrylic paints, water-based paints. You can often find that if the surface you're painting is too glossy, too shiny, it will pool and white and won't cover the surface too well, whereas this has a nice, has a matte finish. There's a guy out who's very good at painting figures called Calvin Tan, and he's actually been using matte varnish as a primer, because it's got a good keying surface to take the paint. He doesn't worry about giving it a universal colour, a single colour, be it grey, black, whatever it might be. So there's this, which is quite easily available if you have a Warhammer store, or even a gaming store might have this. Locally, a lot of places have this now. Hobbycraft also have, although I did hear that they are going to stop Tamiya paints and stuff, but this is a grey fine surface primer from Tamiya. It's a nice, lovely finish. I'd probably use it more on a vehicle than I would on a figure nowadays, but it's good for figures as well. And I haven't used it yet, but I did find this one, fine surface primer, which is this kind of red oxide colour, which I'm going to experiment with, partially because I might use it on a gaming figures, but I have also used Mr. Mahogany surfacer from Mr. Hobby. I tend to muck around and try different ones. I quite like this one, but that kind of gives you a nice brown finish. That number is the fineness of it. I think it's, you got 500 up to 1500. Because I've got a black one here, 1500. I've used both of these. They're both decent. Nothing wrong with them. So I tend to use a rattle can, and I'll go out in the garden and spray it, and then job done.
Is that not the amount of milliliters that's in it?
Nope.
No,
because these are the same size. I think it is the fineness of them.
Okay.
So this is a Mr. Surfacer 500. There is, I've got a Mr. Surfacer 1000, and I think that's the fineness of the finish of these things. So somebody might correct me, but that's my interpretation of them. Now, what I am going to do for mine is, things like these Mr. Surfacers, and the same with this kind of primer, super stinky lacquer kind of finish to them, and you can hose a model with them, and they'll go and cover the detail, or they'll kind of really cling to the model really nicely. I don't find that's quite the same with something like this, which isn't quite got that strong lacquer stink to it. I'm not being technical here, folks, but what I have done is, if I'm going through the first stage of cleaned it, sanded it, and I'll give it a coat of this or Mr. Finishing Surfacer or the mahogany one, and then look for flaws, because this will flow and kind of cling to everything. It will show any problems, but also deal with any problems. And then I have used this as a second coat, because this is what I want to paint onto, because this has got a nicer finish for painting. There is something which we're not going to do, because I don't want to overcomplicate things. There is a technique called zenithal lighting, or zenithal spraying. So the idea is that you give it a first coat or a primer of black or even grey, and then give a second spray with a lighter colour primer from one direction to demonstrate where the highlights are, or to capture the highlights. Some people might use an airbrush to do that. Some people might use that on top of the grey. Both are valid, and I can never see. Ooh, oops, get him out of the way so I don't knock him over again. An example of zenithal light spraying is this guy, where I sprayed in black. You can see the black underneath, and then I airbrushed a light grey mostly in one direction to highlight areas where you can see where I wanted the brightest part of the model to be, where the focus will be. So it can help with understanding where shadows should be, but it can complicate things. You can see got the height, that bit's caught light because I'm spraying it in one direction, and the bottom, those edges of the cloak are in shadow, and the bits under the armor. But we're not, that's just illustrating. Maybe we can do an advanced painting thing one day. But because of people here who won't have done this kind of thing before, I'm just going to spray it black and we're going to take it from there. So that is my intention.
The other thing as well that might highlight other issues with it as well. If you do the zenithal thing,
it could
catch the extra little bits you've missed, maybe.
It could do, yeah. I mean, people are you are more than welcome to do it if you want to. I'm not. I just remembered I made a cup of tea. It will highlight. I mean, yeah, just on this figure alone, it will. You can then see how. Because you can see, I've got little bits of speckling going on with it as well, so that could complicate things on top of everything else, which is why, and that will be worse if you're doing it with a rattle can as well. So there is a good and bad things about doing it. We'll end up with the painting that we'll do. We'll find any of those problems along the way, and then if we do, being brave enough to try and correct them, which we may do just to illustrate. But so I'm not going to do it. Would be, I don't spray this kind of stuff indoors, so I'm not going to demonstrate priming now. So between now and next week, I will fill in and clean up more of the holes. I will go through and take off any more of the remaining stubs, and I will prime him with some black, and that will be ready for next week then. And this is going to be an interesting one. If I was painting this figure and it was a regular kit, the arms would probably be separate, or the binoculars would be separate. We're going to have to spray it in all sorts of different directions to get to all these little nooks and crannies, which, because he's moulded as one, going to be quite tricky to do in places. So there'll be some quite sweeping motions to. My hands always get completely covered, obviously, doing this kind of thing from underside.
You can wear a glove, Rob.
I could do, but that takes thought and planning. Yeah, it's like, I've been shaking this can for 2 minutes, 3 minutes. I'm going to get out and do it now.
So where would you like people to be for the next session?
Right. Yes. So the next session will be he's going to be primed black, and I'm going to be painting the face. So I'll very quickly cover a brief. Yeah, it will be very quick because I can't remember what I did with it. Now that before the end of this, I'll just I will be using a wet palette. I'm not going to demonstrate how to make a wet palette now, but I can kind of go through elements of it. But when I did my first demonstration, just to illustrate. When I did one of those tanker figures, for a palette, I used these. I've become very adept at just taking a tablet out by breaking the surface and not pushing it through, because you can end up with these. And then quite a therapeutic thing is going through and taking off all that sort of stuff. But yeah, these can be handy for mixing paint. And some of them are, I think, pretty good for painting, different size things depending on different tablet things. And I've got drawers full of these things, and I tend not to use them quite so much anymore, but I do use them for metallic colors. But there are commercial wet palettes on the market, and I use them more and more, and you can make your own wet palette. Funny enough, it's not wet at the moment.
Just quickly, Steve asks, is it all right to hand paint his primer, because he has a Vallejo primer he uses?
Yeah. I mean, I've never hand painted a primer, but you can. You're after a uniform surface to paint, and to certainly, I don't know if resin is any different to painting plastic or metal or anything like that. You want a surface in which to apply your paints to, so that's basically all you're after. So you could hand paint them, just after a uniform surface at the end of the day. So yeah, the very most basic element of the wait, a new one out. The wet palette is a this is a commercial one, which is a red grass wet palette, and then that could equally be a Tupperware box. And then there is the sponge, which is I'm not going to wet this yet. I'll do that next week. And so a sponge, I think some of the washing up sponges, the really thin flat ones, are good to use as well. You could use one of those. You could I think I've seen people take kitchen paper and fold it up and put into several layers and moisten that as well. But this will be moistened and wet, and then a parchment paper will be put on top, and this describes them as membranes. But when I say parchment paper, before the commercial ones hit the scene, people would use greaseproof paper for baking for baking purposes. So it would just be buy it from Tesco, cut a sheet of it off the size you want, and that would sit on top of the sponge, and water would wick up to the underside of the paper, so this wouldn't be soaking wet. And then you can mix, you put your paint on and it stays wet, and you can put two paints together and then mix them together, which we will see happen next week. Now, what the people have done, you will find make your own wet palette DVD or tutorials and things online all over the place. And if you're using a Tupperware, you can put a lid on it and then come back again, and you can take the lid off and you can use the same paints. What the fancy new ones, like this red grass one, things like the membrane, first of all, this is a super fine sponge, and kind of takes more water. Plus, they now sell them with microbial kind of stuff in them, so they don't go mouldy, because there is a tendency to get mold in them and it goes bonkers. So that's one aspect of the new latest generation, I'd call them, because the earlier generations didn't have that. And now the latest thing is the purposely bought paper membranes have a side that you can wash these and use them again and several times before they become unuseful. So you can clean the membrane and reuse it, and then you can put a lid on it and come back, and I've come back 2 weeks later and been able to use the same paint and the same mixers, which can be quite handy. And what you'll also see is Tupperwares are great, but they can be quite deep. And you'll notice that this commercial one is quite shallow. So compared to our model there, that's not very deep at all. Now that's handy because you haven't got to stick your paintbrush inside a thing. You're not being hampered by the depths of it. And you're then, so there is a logic to it being like this. And when you're using it regularly, you understand. So I will be using wet palette next time. So there is that. And then
I was going to say about wet palettes, it totally changes the way that you paint if you've never used one before, because you save so much paint because you don't have to re-squeeze any out. You can keep it almost forever as long as you keep the water fresh. Thing about microbial as well, if you leave a penny, I was told this, if you put a penny or two inside the wet palette to keep the parchment paper down, that helps as a microbial as well.
Useful, very useful. I'll say as well, I bought some of these little bottles, and these have been really handy. Is that if you do get any any evaporation, these are really good to get water into the edges on your table without having to move it to a tap, all that kind of stuff. So different useful things to do there. Other things that I don't do and I'm going to start doing, but I just saw on a YouTube video the other day, I'm going to when you end up, and we'll cover this again when we start doing painting, is use an old synthetic brush to mix the paints on the palette, and then use your fancy Artis Opus brush. It's really nice to paint with, because when you mix it, you're likely to get paint right up to the ferrule bit there, and that's where you'll get problems when that cakes on and dries. So I'm going to try and do as much as we can with these Artis Opus brushes. They have got a very good reputation and brilliant stuff to get us to have these. But in general, I would highly recommend getting the best brushes you can for painting. I've been using the same set of brushes for many years and looking after them, and I think there can be a false economy by going cheap and getting proven. So cheap brushes have a very good value in the hobby for certain tasks, but not necessarily for painting fine detail. If you can't hold paint on in the brush, and if you can't hold the point, if the point's going to suddenly split midway through painting, it's not a very good brush. So there's that aspect of it as well. So I think that's covered pretty much everything I'd intended today. So preparation, mounting, priming, just to talk about, and then next time will be sticking some paint on him. So hopefully we're done.
Great. Well, just quickly, Adi says that distilled water won't grow moldy, so don't use it from the tap, and any piece of silver or copper works. So just to keep it antimicrobial. Also, if you're not using a Tupperware box and you want to buy some chocolates for your partner, get yourself some Ferrero Rochers because they are sort of long, flat, white
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
box. Send the chocolates to me, and then I can dispose of those for you. But that's
Can you
usually
not just
quite.
knock on the ambassador's door and ask if they've got some?
Oh, ambassador. Yeah. So that's another thing that you could use.
Yeah. Yeah. There's been such a flurry of commercial stuff of things. You can just see it from holders to wet pallets, and sometimes simple old things are just as good, and DIY is just as good. So yeah, as a solution we can find. And if there are, you've still got questions, fire them away in the mess, and we'll try to make sure they're covered, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Rob. See you next week.
Yeah. Cheers, folks.